So with the second Trump administration, we are quickly seeing the US actually descend into fascist hell. Now, two recent events this week, I think perfectly sum up just the US brand of fascism. And it's basically becoming a fascist state to protect corporate interests and to protect US imperialism. And of course, what I'm talking about is the announcement by Donald Trump yesterday that they would label anti-Tesla protesters as domestic terrorists, and also, of course, the illegal detention of Mahmoud Khalil by ICE for basically no reason. And they're saying it's because he promotes Hamas or something like that. Initially, they were questioning his visa status, and once they realized, he had a green card, they then made up something else, but it is because he is a Palestinian. In regard to the Tesla stuff, I said this would happen. Someone asked Donald Trump a question at the press conference. Guarantee it was like a right-wing reporter. And then, of course, afterwards, Donald Trump says something, and then Republican politicians and Elon Musk start saying, well, yeah, you said it, so now we're going to push you to actually do this. So we're actually going to push you in the direction of classifying anti-Tesla protesters as domestic terrorists. And in some ways, people might think it kind of goes against what we're seeing with the complete deregulation of the centralized state in America. But it's a weird kind of blend where, yeah, they are deregulating stuff and basically running the US government like a tech startup. But I guess we haven't seen what's coming next, and I might make a video on this in regard to techno-feudalism, is the reason I feel like they are cutting all these jobs at the various departments in the US government isn't so they're going to run like a leaner style of government which will just fuck over people. I fully expect private corporations to fill the void of all these people who've been let go. I mean, yeah, perhaps for a time it will kind of adhere to like startup culture where less people work harder for worse results, but at the end of the day, I feel like private interests will swoop in and get loads of government contracts to fulfill the roles government workers were previously working. So even in that regard, I don't think there is a fundamental death of the US state. I just think it's being privatized. But also, even if there is a deregulation of things to do with like social safety nets, at the same time, I think we all knew like the FBI, the CIA, the US military weren't going to be significantly cut, and everything would be done to protect these institutions and protect the goals of these institutions. So that's why we are still seeing this fascism from a centralized state play out, despite the fact that a lot of people doing these cuts might pretend to be like libertarians or something like that. So I want to talk about all of this today because it's two separate issues, but it is obviously happening at the exact same time. And also, on one of them, the Democrats actually paved the way for this brand of fascism with Biden's crackdown on student protesters while he was aiding Israel in destroying Gaza while he was president, and obviously unleashing police forces and intelligence services on student protesters who by and large did not support Hamas, which they're using to justify all these crackdowns. But also, even if they did, the US has the First Amendment. So in theory, and it has been proven in court cases in people who support like very extremist views, like supporting neo-Nazism and stuff like that, in theory, that should be protected under the First Amendment, and you shouldn't be able to remove people's green card status or deport them for expressing support for a group like Hamas. But the guy in question that we're going to talk about today didn't even do that. No grounds for his detention. But don't worry, a lot of Democrats are still smearing Mahmoud Khalil because they hate Palestinians too, and they actually agree with what Trump's doing. But they know they can't just say that because a lot of the Democratic base, even if they don't like Palestine and they support Israel, they still know this is an infringement on freedom of speech. So they kind of have to pretend they are opposed to it, even though there are a lot of Democrats that appear not to be. So all of that coming up for you today. Please follow me on social media at the Kavernacle. And also, if you want to support my work, please support me on Patreon and support me on YouTube memberships. And also follow me on Blue Sky. So first, let's talk about this like corporate fascism and how the Trump administration is going full fascist to protect one corporation in this instance. Like I said, a reporter basically gave Trump this question saying, some people say they should be charged as domestic terrorists. I don't know who was saying that before, but some people say, did Elon Musk even plant this question? Maybe he did. And Trump basically saying he will class them as this.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Mr. President, you talked about some of the violence that's been going on around the country at dealerships. Some say they should be labeled domestic terrorists because...
I will do that. I'll do it. I'm going to stop them. We catch anybody doing it because they're harming a great American company. When you heard an American company, especially a company like this, supplies so many jobs that others are unable to do, when you do that, those people are going to go through a big problem when we catch them. And we have you get a lot of cameras up. We already know who some of them are. We're going to catch them. And they're bad guys. They're the same guys that screw around with our schools and universities, the same garbage. And no, we're going to catch them. And let me tell you, you do it to Tesla and you do it to any company, we're going to catch you and you're going to go through hell.
Now, this was expected. So Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, said the heroic work of Elon Musk has so panicked the radical left that they are now calling him racist and engaging in domestic terrorism to attack Tesla owners. Congress will investigate the sources of these attacks and help the DOJ and FBI ensure those responsible are prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Elon Musk tweeting, thank you to this. Unusual Wells tweeting, Trump says he will label violence against Tesla dealerships as domestic terrorism, and Elon Musk put in the fire emoji. And we also have this. A day after Donald Trump said this, Marjorie Taylor Greene formalized the idea of a letter to the Justice Department and FBI. In a post on Twitter, Marjorie Taylor Greene said the House Doge Subcommittee asked Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel to look into the recent Tesla attacks. And she wrote, who is behind it? Who is funding it? Is there a Democrat-leaning NGO link? We look forward to exposing these terrorists and bringing them to justice. These attacks, which seem to involve coordinated acts of vandalism, arson, and other acts of violence, seriously threaten public safety. Reports suggest that groups like Antifa, known for their history of domestic terrorism, including throughout the summer of 2020 following the death of George Floyd, may be involved in the recent Tesla attacks. This letter went on to say that identifying the groups and individuals responsible for the Tesla attacks is essential to preventing further violence and ensuring those responsible are held accountable. So yeah, just as I predicted, Elon Musk would push for this, but then we do have a powerful member of Congress, the Speaker of the House, saying he wants the FBI and DOJ to go after Tesla protesters, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is an influential congressperson as well. So I also said in my video, some people pushed back. I said I don't necessarily think that destroying Tesla dealerships or charging stations are the best use of time, but I also said it's not worth it to be sent to prison for 20 years for domestic terrorism. And obviously, yeah, it is, terrible. We're living in this corporate fascist state. We saw those policemen all protecting the Tesla dealership. At the same time, in terms of the vandalism angle, yeah, come on, you really don't want to go to prison for doing something that essentially won't help anything in the long run. But also, the concerning thing, of course, is they're going to take the worst examples and they're going to talk about the vandalism. And what's going to happen is, if there's a significant protest at a Tesla dealership, I am sure they're going to start arresting people and charging them with domestic terrorism because they want to protect their buddy Elon, but it's part of what we're seeing as a wider crackdown on just free speech across the United States. And this is where these two stories link, in that Donald Trump said that boycotting Tesla was illegal, again, seems to go against actual free market consumer principles of capitalism generally. Obviously, there's always been a crackdown on BDS boycotts of Israeli goods, but I guess what is happening now is the mask is just completely dropping. We all know that police and the government will protect private property, corporate interests. I mean, that's what the police are designed for. And I've always said this to people when arguing about if the police should exist. Police do not exist to protect you. They exist to protect the status quo. They exist to protect private property. That's what they are always going to do. So this is just the logical next step for a police force to start enforcing the will of their corporate masters. And that happens to be, in this case, Elon Musk. And as he becomes more powerful in the US government, there's going to be more protests at his company. So, of course, obviously going to try and push through new mandates so the actual government can start arresting people and throwing them in prison for decades for protesting Elon Musk companies. And also now you have the most unhinged people now running the FBI. Like, yeah, the FBI has always been terrible, and there's no denying that. But there has been a certain level of crazy that has now taken over the FBI, which will just act to enforce the will of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And they will help to ensure the will of this corporate brand of fascism we are seeing in the United States right now. But yeah, these basic, like, unprecedented attacks on freedom of speech and freedom of protest go hand in hand with what I was talking about at the start. And to move away from the corporate fascism, obviously America is going full fascist to protect basically US imperialism abroad in regards to Israel. Now, the relationship with Israel is very complex in many ways in terms of, like, how much do they influence US policy versus how much do the US just do anything to protect Israel, because that's part of US domination of the Middle East. Also completely matches up with economic interests. For example, the $4 billion or so dollars the US give Israel in aid every single year is on the condition they spend most of it buying weapons from US companies. So that is just like a general subsidy for the US arms industry. And obviously there's loads of business ties between Israel and the US generally. The US has a financial and imperialist incentive to keep Israel strong, to keep Israel as their attack dog in the region, and completely back every single thing Israel does. And with the Trump administration, we just have, like, personal closer ties with the Israeli elite, people like Jared Kushner, for example. But also with the US system and how much corporate and financial influence just anyone can have on random politicians, we also see lots of people who are ideologically Zionists, whether they be Christian Zionists or Jewish Zionists. They spend a lot of money to influence the US government. And obviously we have organizations like AIPAC, which massively influence things like the Democratic Party to be crazily pro-Israel at the expense of basically anything to do with, like, the US Constitution and free speech. So obviously really gross, appropriating, like, a Jewish phrase to post this on their Instagram account. Shalom Mahmoud, ICE proudly apprehended and detained Mahmoud Khalil, a radical foreign pro-Hamas student on the campus of Columbia. This is the first arrest of many to come. Obviously just gross, they're bragging about their fascism just to the entire world on the White House official account. And Guardian just reporting, for those of you who don't know, who is Mahmoud Khalil. So the recent Columbia University graduate was detained by ICE on Saturday, was linked by Donald Trump without evidence to pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic and anti-American activity. Khalil was a student, steady negotiator and a leader whose activism placed him at the center of a national movement for Palestinian solidarity. He's a Palestinian green card holder who is currently in immigration detention in Louisiana and was a lead negotiator for the Columbia University Apartheid Divest, a role that thrust him into the spotlight during the pro-Palestinian encampment protest last spring. Long before his high-profile arrest, he gained a reputation amongst fellow protesters as a principal and strategic organizer, earning praise for his ability to de-escalate tense situations. He was born in Syria in 1995 to Palestinian parents and fled Syria for Lebanon 2 years later after the start of the Syrian civil war. So essentially a double refugee of Palestine and Syria. He taught himself English while working with Syrian refugees to help them rebuild their lives through the Syrian American education non-profit Jansua. He also pursued a degree in computer science at the Lebanese American University in Beirut. He also worked for the British government's Foreign Office on Syrian issues from inside Lebanon. And he eventually arrived in Columbia in January 2023 as a graduate student. And when the war in Gaza began, he was part of the small group of organizers who planned the first campus protest for Palestine on the 12th of October. He became the CUAD's lead negotiator during the protest and the bridge between student protesters demanding divestment from Israel. And basically, if you just read about this guy, loads of people saying he was chosen as the lead negotiator because he was good at de-escalating, he was just good at talking to people and having these conversations that were often tense. He's worked with the British government, he's worked with the UN. There's no evidence he has supported Hamas at all in anything he has done and anything he has said. Simply put, he was just the face of a Palestinian protest at a university that actually employs ex-IDF and Israeli intelligence officials in some of its departments, right? And also a lot of these universities wrap up a lot of their funds in things to do with Israel. So they just wanted the universities to divest from that, and it of course made him a target, and that's why he was arrested in the first place. And even with their justification for why he's arrested, they cannot get it straight. So Ken Klippenstein wrote this article, Trump is coming after legal residents, are citizens next. So just talking about Mahmoud, Ken wrote, he's a green card holder, making him a lawful permanent resident of the US. By going after a lawful resident, Trump is expanding his war on the many supposed threats besieging America. The arrest goes well beyond Trump's usual fixations, illegal immigrants or even foreign student visa holders. He is now just one step away from going after all Americans, trying to create precedent that protest and free speech is criminal. Government is not alleging that Khalil provided material support to Hamas or other terrorist groups. They instead assert a vague national security justification. In other words, the Trump White House just doesn't like what he said. Trump administration is framing the arrest as the implementation of the president's executive order on combating anti-Semitism. The order authorizes federal agencies to monitor for and report activities by alien students who might be violating the civil rights of Jewish students. Such reports, the order continues, can lead to investigations and, if warranted, actions to remove such aliens. So just some other officials in the US government talking about this. Marco Rubio said they will be revoking the visas and green cards of Hamas supporters in America. Leo Terrell, the senior counsel to the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights and head of the Anti-Semitism Task Force, says, this arrest of this individual is a deterrent against anti-Semitism, and this is the beginning of a series of victories. So what you're seeing there as well is something I've been talking about for a while, and that's the rise of like woke fascism. It's basically fascism wrapped in the language of identity politics. These people claim that a fascist branch of the US government, ICE, are arresting a guy infringing on his First Amendment rights because he poses a threat to Jewish civil rights with his rhetoric, and he's a Hamas supporter, by the simple fact that he is a Palestinian who advocates for Palestinian civil rights, right? So just being a Palestinian basically to the US government now means you support terrorism, you support violence, you inherently support Hamas and stuff like that. And as they're saying, they're going to start doing this even more. And of course, it is a supremacy we're seeing by organizations like the ADL, who also supported this arrest recently. I'll see if I get the statement here. I think I do. The ADL said in response, we firmly believe there should be swift and severe consequences for those who provide material support to foreign terrorists, incite violence in the support of them, or conceal their identities in order to harass and intimidate Jewish individuals. We appreciate the Trump administration's broad, bold set of efforts to counter campus anti-Semitism, and this action further illustrates that resolve by holding the alleged perpetrators responsible. Obviously, any deportation action or revoking a green card or visa must be undertaken in alignment with the required due process. We also hope that this action serves as a deterrent to those who might consider breaking the law on college campuses or anywhere. So the ADL there, which purports to be like a liberal organization fighting against racism, again, endorsing fascism because it protects their perverse view of what anti-Semitism is. And these are the people who believe anti-Semitism is basically all criticism of the Israeli government. And that includes if you compare the actions of the IDF to Nazis. And just a reminder for everyone, AOC actually voted for a bill that supported this. He actually voted for something which would be adopted by things like universities, that if you say what the IDF have done in Gaza is similar to, I don't know, what the Germans did in Warsaw, you're an anti-Semite. So that's where we're at with progressive resistance libs in the US. They will vote to empower fascism. And it's the language of woke fascism right here. They are doing fascism, really xenophobic, racist policies, targeting Muslims and Palestinians, and using the language of anti-racism. The ADL has never been that subtle about this, but that's what we're getting right now. And like I said, they have this interest because all they care about is the support for Israel. And that also comes through when you have other people like Hakeem Jeffries. And here's Chuck Schumer's statement. Ken points out, he finally released a statement which condemned him straight away. I abhor many of the opinions and policies that Mahmoud Khalil holds and supports, and have made my criticism of the anti-Semitic actions at Columbia loudly known. Mr. Khalil is also a legal permanent resident here, and his wife, who is 8 months pregnant, is an American citizen. While he may be in violation of various campus rules regarding how the protests were conducted, that's a matter for the university, and I have encouraged them to be more robust in how they combat anti-Semitism. The Trump administration's Department of Homeland Security must articulate any criminal charges or facts that would justify his detention. So these are some of the leaders of the Democrats right now offering really, really weak condemnation of essentially ICE kidnapping a US citizen for no reason because he's Palestinian, and was part of a negotiation team to make the university divest from supporting Israel. And you know why all these liberals are like this? Is because this all started under Biden. When the NYPD and LAPD were running into protests, beating up students for being against some of the worst crimes against humanity, that had the full-throated support of the liberal elite and the liberal establishment, right? New York is a state that is almost completely Democrat run. And most of them were supporting the NYPD and talking about this insane anti-Semitism on college campuses. So Ken also wrote an article back in May, the intelligence community is spying on student protesters. So the National Counterterrorism Center is now working overtime to find evidence of foreign funding of pro-Palestinian student protesters, I have learned. The efforts follow repeated calls by Congress for the federal government to investigate university protesters' links to Hamas, and coincides with a push by the FBI and Homeland Security to link them to foreign actors. But on May 14th, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen requested a suspicious activity reports on organizations that participate in the protests, like Students for Justice in Palestine, Jewish Voice of Peace, and If Not Now. These would be based on banking information. The letter she sent read, the committees are investigating the sources of funding and financing for the groups who are organizing, leading, and participating in pro-Hamas, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, and anti-American protests with illegal encampments on American campuses. And back then as well, Nancy Pelosi told protesters to go back to China and that they were connected to Russia. And she also called for the FBI to investigate the financing of the protests. So to the Democratic establishment, Biden, Pelosi, and the others, they couldn't imagine that maybe people seeing every single day for like over a year the worst crimes against humanity of this century, they couldn't simply be motivated by a desire for their government to end that. No, they must have been paid by Iran and Russia and China to protest on a college campus. And I put this on, and it's so wild the authoritarian hand the US government actually has on its universities and always has had. But yeah, what we're seeing there is just the mask slip for all of these things. So in this case, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. The whole US establishment just wants to end free speech in America so they can continue to support Israel without any backlash and without any consequence. And this includes most liberal politicians and the Democrats as well. And even the supposed new generation of Democrats like AOC, they're also supporting this stuff as well. It doesn't matter if they maybe say something that you agree with later on. When it comes to things like voting for the Iron Dome or whatever, even people like Jamal Bowman, who eventually was ousted because he didn't support Israel enough, he voted for Iron Dome funding, right? So the whole Democratic establishment is firmly cut by things like AIPAC and just the foreign policy lobby in the United States government. But now what's happening, it's not even being more subtle and strictly related to politics. They're just like, yeah, we're going to throw you in a fucking cell if you dare to be in a protest that advocates for the human rights of someone, right? And we don't give a shit. Like, First Amendment, that doesn't apply to you, because you might have supported for something we don't like. And like we've all been saying, there is no evidence this guy supported anything violent. No evidence. But even if there was evidence, again, he still shouldn't be thrown in a cell and basically disappeared, because that's what happened initially, because he said something the government didn't like. Because in America, apparently, you have the First Amendment, which, like I said, has long been established by various different courts, various different cases, which have shown that you can even support pretty extreme things and it's legal and it won't get you thrown in jail without a sentence or without any sort of legal proceedings. But again, we're seeing America go full mask off fascist to protect corporate interests and to protect Israel. And in regards to the Israel situation, it's just the uniparty. All of them support it. All of them support this because for various different reasons. Many ideological Zionists in both parties, Christian Zionist and Israeli Zionist money pouring into both. And of course, just the general standard policy of the US government, Israel benefits them in many, many ways. And if people want to change the conversation about how our relationship with the Israeli government and just the Israeli nation state, then they must be crushed. And even, Donald Trump's calling Chuck Schumer a Palestinian as a slur for even releasing this terrible statement that basically just says, yeah, you maybe can't do that because it's a violation of the First Amendment. So yeah, America is truly like fucked at the moment. And the one thing I'm hoping with all of this, and it's even like Donald Trump and Elon Musk at the White House, I just feel like sometimes there can be a silver lining of when something is so obvious, it just becomes increasingly hard to ignore for just average people. Like, yeah, we do have the MAGA conservative cultists who will be cheering this on and they'll be loving it. But that's not most Americans. Most Americans, even most Trump voters, I would say, aren't people who are just like absolutely loving this, tuning in every day to watch the demise of America as it spirals into a fascist state, right? And when Trump is tanking the economy and economic conditions are just getting harder and you're seeing all this shit at the same time, you're just hoping more people realize what their problems are. But again, my main issue with American politics, and even maybe people on the left who advocate for American politics, the Democratic Party is not going to save you. And Bernie Sanders, if he had any spine, he would have ran third party in 2016 and 2020 and actually started a movement where you could actually get rid of the two-party system. And I know British politics isn't the best example, but even I feel this with leftists in the UK. I would have loved Jeremy Corbyn 5 years ago to make a new political party, right? And actually challenge from the left the status quo. Because we've seen that Nigel Farage has done this successfully. One guy, basically, on his own political brand, is changing the political conversation in the United Kingdom, where there's actually a chance where people like him could get into power. Obviously funded by a lot of rich people, but it's still just one guy's personal brand that's achieved this. Same with Donald Trump in a way. So Bernie Sanders and Corbyn could do this too, but in my opinion, they're just too spineless. And they're dooming the rest of us, because if the Republicans do actually allow another election and they get voted out, who's going to be the new president? Gavin Newsom? Pete Buttigieg? At best, someone like AOC, who's still going to support the status quo. So I'm hoping maybe how bad it's going to get will hopefully birth something better. I'm just not sure if that'll be the case. But that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.